Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of the Co-op Pod. Of course, you've got me, Guru, your main host, and I am joined as well by my close friend and fellow host, Nas, and we have another interesting episode for you today. Today's episode is going to be something that's really up my alley because we got a lot of guild-focused stuff to go over, so I'm super excited. And talking about my alley, we're actually going to start this off with a little bit of a personal announcement and a few things that I had recently announced and launched that I'm excited to share with you. Then we're going to jump into an exciting little bit of, I guess you could call it secret trivia on MTTM, but also an announcement for some close independent professional friends of mine. And then we go right into some really structured big end guild stuff. We're going to be talking about GuildFi. We're going to move from GuildFi into some big games, really, really big games that if you haven't seen them yet, we're going to have some awesome leaks to share with you guys. And then we're going to get into an exciting announcement for another big game that's in the space. But that all being said, let's jump right into it. Nas, take it away.
Funny, you passed the ball to me and I got to pass right back. No, so thank you. Yeah, so we're starting first with you having a kind of big announcement this week. You launched your official website, dude. So maxdywald.com. I don't know if you've had the handle forever, but congratulations on getting your name as a
Thank
handle.
you.
I also have mine. I'm very proud owner of mine for I think almost 10 years. So I think my question is, there's a lot of it, obviously everything about you, but why now, right? Maybe you could walk us a little bit about the thought process, what's it about, and I think my other question would be to add on was how important do you think it is in Web3 for a creator, an entrepreneur like you, to have a website?
Yeah, great questions. And I think I touched on it a little bit from like just a personal standing on my thread, but to go even deeper because it's so much easier to explain it not on a thread. You know, the character limit is just so it's so limiting on Twitter. But I think first things first, the handle, or sorry, the domain. I've been thinking about handles because of that Web3 handle that recently got purchased on
Yes.
Twitter. But yeah, that domain, I've had it for a while. So yes, I have been squatting it. The moment I saw it, I got into domains like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna pick that one up. So I've had it in the back pocket. I just haven't actually had the time or the need until now to actually go and build it. So I did build it myself. That's why it's not like tip top end. I think I did good, but I'm no professional web dev. So, guys, anybody who's checking it out after this episode, cut me some slack, but also give me some feedback. I've had a few. I've got to say, I love having friends that are smarter than me because I have had some feedback from people saying, hey, here's some tips. Improve this, check this, you might have missed this. I'm like, you guys are the best. So it has improved a lot since initial launch. But let's get right into it, the website. The reason for it and why now, I think, is that, first off, building a website isn't easy. So that is one thing that, as an individual, if you have a desire to have a website, you got to understand it's not going to be an easy process to build a decent website. If you want something that's going to reflect your brand as either a creator or an entrepreneur, you want to make sure that it's something quality, or at least up to the quality standards that you want to put forward. But for me, I think the biggest thing was I finally had enough of a drive to build it. I went to AxiCon. I did not think it was going to be as impactful on me as it was, but being able to go up and host those events on the main stage and then get the feedback I got, it wasn't all just positive echo chamber feedback. Like a lot of it was even constructive feedback saying, hey, look, was this your first time up there? I'm like, yeah, it was. And they're like, you did amazing, but here's some tips. You should do this. And I just started thinking in my head, I really like this. Like, I really love the idea of being able to go up in real life. I think that's a big thing for me because I do a lot of talking digitally, but in real life, being able to go up there and be on stage, it felt so exhilarating. It felt really right. And it also made me feel really proud. I remember getting the professional photography kit afterwards, and I was like, whoa, wow, there was like photographers taking great pictures of me and stuff. Like, this is just something I wasn't used to. And I finally felt like, hey, now is the time. So it took me about 10 days, just on and off. I wasn't working on it full time, but I was spending a few hours every single day working on it. And then it got to the point where I knew I had to do it. So I was like, hey, look, you know what? The last couple days I grinded it out. I filled it out with all my projects, etc. And the main reason why I did it was because I just wanted to have a central place that me as a professional and a creator can use to really make a hub for everything that I'm doing in Web3. I want it to be a place where, I have Twitter, but Twitter's only so good. And I have a link tree, but like the link tree just doesn't really bring people through an experience or a funnel to understand me and connect with me well enough. So I thought, okay, make a website. I can showcase what I've done. I can give people more like links to connect with other content or collaborations or projects that I'm connected with. One of them is this project. The Co-op Pod's on there, like right front and center in my collabs and content. And then from there too, another way for people to contact me, right? Because I think Twitter DMs, they can do it, but a lot of the times it can be really tough on both sides. For me, as an individual who wants to be in contact with people, but even for the people who want to try and cold contact me, if I give them a chance to email me or put in like a contact form with some designated fields, makes things a little bit easier for them. And I've already had quite a few come through actually, which has made it so much easier for me because I can document it. So I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but I think to just really bullet point this, number one, timing was right because I felt motivated to take a step forward in officiating myself as a KOL, as an entrepreneur, as a creator, because of what had happened recently in my content life and just my professional life. And then number two was, as far as the purpose of it, it's really just a hub. I think it is so important if you are going to be doing a lot of things in the space and continuing to try and grow as a professional, you want to be able to showcase and document it because it's just like a resume, right? I talk to people about like putting together a CV or having like a nice database of stuff that they've done. I come from engineering back in the day. That was my degree. An engineer will always have an engineer's handbook, right? Like I was in aerospace engineering, and every time you worked on something, you wanted it written down and signed off on because it held onto it for you. So that's why I want to do it. Showcase, document, hub. And also, I guess a part of me was like, hey, this will make me look pretty official. If I have a full website with my name on it, like people are going to look at it and be like, okay, maybe this guy means business.
No, I love that. I think amazing points and really strong ones. So for me, I also have like my site. I think you put a really good point. A couple of them I want to like double click on. So one was the officialness of it. Right, I got obsessed with domain buying and stuff because I didn't realize how much of an entrepreneur I wanted to be, and I had my own site, and a lot of it had been, I was a 22-year-old kind of like entrepreneur, and you had to prove yourself, right? And no one takes you really seriously, so I had to think about every single thing 10 years ago that I could do to seem like I knew or to prove that I had something to offer, right? And just so happens I was able to get my domain, and you and I kind of we grew up and we got professional in this content era, right? And it was very difficult to move from platform to platform. Like you have to have a Facebook page for your business and Instagram eventually. Now there's TikTok, there's LinkedIn, like for the legacy, there's people, there was what was it called? Google Circle or Google, like they had their own.
Oh man, I remember that.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was like, it was so difficult. So eventually for me, what ended up happening was exactly that. Like you said, a hub. Like, so I use my website in a weird practice where it actually also helps me remember what my focus areas are and the things that I'm involved in, right? I have investments in multiple businesses. I have multiple crafts I've developed over the years. And for me, it's like every year I kind of revisit on my birthday and I'm like, okay, where am I at now? And do I need to kind of like update the world passively on what it is? And no matter what happens to my LinkedIn, to whatever, it's in my email. I've had this email for almost 10 years now. It's like no matter what. So I'm really happy you brought those points. It's I think became less formal for me, but it kind of turned into almost a set thing for me that I'm hoping just makes it clear for other people as well. I do have a funny story I'll share though, really, really quickly about my domain. So I have joehosway.com, right? That's my name. And in this period of like maybe 6 years ago, I lost the domain. I actually didn't renew it. Yes, so I had switched credit cards. I didn't realize it. I was so busy. And I lost it. And for a year and a half, okay, I'll keep it I guess a little R-rated, but someone squatted it, right, and turned it into a best places to do the deed in Europe. And tried to, I was expecting like some kind of bribe mail or, like thing. And I just was so busy at the time at work. I was like, I didn't care. And for some reason, so a year and a half later, I think it was 2 years, right, of the registration, I put an alert that it happened. The person gave up. The person just let it expire. And I'm like, so I got it for completely normal rate. I'm very happy
Nice.
I've had it back. But it was funny because I had a friend reach out to me I hadn't seen since high school and go like, is this your official site, dude? And I'm like, yeah, I had to explain why it became like where to have, to do the deed in Europe is the best and all this like stuff. So protect your domains, people.
And your ENS. And your
ENS. Are you ENS Maxi? I mean, do you have your ENS? Do you have the others like Sol, Lens, and all these others?
I don't have the soul and everything. If they ever release a Ron, I'm gonna get the Ron, but I do
For
have the
sure.
ETH. However, so the official zero, the number 0x Guru,
Yeah.
was registered a year ago for 10 years by an
Jeez.
account that I think somebody has lost the seed phrase for because it's been inactive for more than a year. So I was like, okay, well that sucks. But I have written 0x Guru, so I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll get over with that.
Yeah. That's definitely
Yeah.
good. I mean, for anyone else here, just not really formally game related, but there are a few other interesting ones like .lens, which is supposed to be like a social one built by Lens Protocol. If you have the .eth, you can claim that for I think free. And there's new social
Ooh.
networks coming out. Yeah, just enough. I got it the other day, and yeah, so as long as you can claim the same thing, it's supposed to be like the new social network built by, I think funded by Aave, if I'm not mistaken. All right. Anyway, next thing. So speaking of you obviously MTTM is a big part of you. We have some kind of like personal news. I found out the other day that these two guys who were recently hired by SkyMavis were from the community. As far as I could tell, they're from the general community, are
Mhm.
related to MTTM. So this is OX Jaatster, just Jat, and OX Hale. Hale has been someone who's been making amazing threads related to data and competitive side and tokens related to Axie. And they just got hired to, I believe it's the not competitive integrity council, but I think something in that area related to the
Yeah, it is.
balancing.
They work closely with Philip
Correct,
on that.
Philip, on the
Yeah.
product side for Axie Infinity.
Yeah.
And so that other part of this official Sky Mavis team. So congratulations to you guys, or hope you guys, check this out. But is it true that they were part of MTTM? I think I was talking to Abu and he had a story about it. So I think you should tell us. One, congrats to them, but I'd love to hear how that happened.
Yeah, so I guess a bit of trivia. They are OG MTTM. Jaatster actually started his Web3 career in general with MTTM. So Abu and Jaatster initially got connected with one another, and Jaatster was really like you could just imagine if you've ever had any interactions with him. He's a very smart, very driven young man, and he had that right from the get go. When he was talking to Abu, he's like, "Hey, look, I want to get connected with you guys." I think he just caught some of us on the content. Like he saw some of my content. He learned about MTTM, met Abu, and he's like, I think you guys are a great group of people that I want to learn from. And I really picked it up when I first talked to him. I was like, man, there's something in this guy. He's got like a sparkle in his eye, right? Even though I'd never even seen his face, I could just feel it in just the way that he handled himself. So Jaatster initially came on. He got a team from Abu, so he was quote unquote a scholar, though we don't do scholarships in MTTM, so he was more of a partner. And he was very committed to Axie. So this was when V2 was still very prominent, actually, when he got involved. This was like months back, but he was very bullish on Origin. Actually, he loved Origin. I'm saying Origin because this was a while back. There's no S yet.
There's no asset, yeah.
So he was super bullish on Origin, and he had told me. I remember him telling me. He said, "Hey, I'm going to focus on Origin because I think it's the future of Axie, and I want to work hard to make a name for myself in Axie." And I was so committed to help him, right? I was like, "Hey, you let me know anything you need. MTTM is here to support you." I remember even when he's like, "Hey, I want to learn about Twitter." I gave him a breakdown on it, helped him start things up, and I was like, "Look, you make some threads, you put some posts up, I'll retweet them for you." And like I've got a pretty big following, right? So he was like, "Oh wow, really? Like that is substantial to know that you have a big, KOL in the community willing to give you that leg up in making a name for yourself." So I was fully committed to helping him because of course this wasn't just me, picking favorites. I really did see something in him. So for me personally, like I don't want to take anything away from his hard work and success, but I want to say that I really felt it when I first met him, and it makes me proud to see it come to fruition.
No,
Now Hale on the other hand,
sorry, before we go to
Hale
Hale, I don't
oh,
want
go
to
ahead.
jump on something. I just want to comment about something about, I didn't mean to interrupt, but for Jad
Oh
in
no, go ahead.
particular, like, because again, I'm also, my Twitter feed is a weird mix of like all these Web3 games. Axie is obviously a big part of it, but a lot of others. And I crap you not. I ended up remembering Jatster's name really because of Origin threads. He was one of the few people. I saw people start to tag him, just like started tagging him. Like I mean, his threads and points were very in depth about balancing and everything. Like oh, and then I ended up
Hmm.
remembering the name, and then it just became so synonymous now with. At a certain point, it became so synonymous leading up to Axie Origin with really good thoughts about Origin. It just was not everything was so thoughtful and consistent, and so yeah, I just want to echo from somebody who's completely blind, kind of like who discovered it blindly without knowing about MTTM.
Hmm.
This is someone as a like an outside consumer, I suppose, or community member, just witnessing it happen and fully back what you said there. sorry, yeah, we can go on to Hale, but I just wanted to give credit where it was due from a blind discoverer, I guess.
Oh, I appreciate that because it's always different when you see it from another point of view, right? Like for me, I saw how that developed, and it's so cool. I'm actually got to tell you guys the story of it because there was a point like early beta Origin. Some people might not know, but I actually worked with Philip to prepare a Origin testing, like the beta phase, to get the information and the data for Origin. So I worked with them on that, and I put that together. So in the process of that, we had everybody, like we had a seriously crazy group of people in MTTM just chatting Origin all day. We had like Philip, we had Jiho, we had Shade, like Jeffrey Shade, we had Jaatster, me, Abu. We were all in there just chatting, and we became really friendly. And I actually think this was a unique part of Origin. It was super early. People weren't talking about it. It wasn't big, but we really liked it. And this is when Hale comes in because Hale was really big in MTTM around that time. So Hale was in there talking like early leaks. We were setting up the bot in MTTM. If you've ever been into MTTM, you can actually type like bot commands to bring up cards from Origin or like different kinds of status effects because you never know. In the middle of a conversation, how easy is it to just be like, hey, I'm talking about this card. Bring it up. Look at it. This is what I'm talking about. You see this? This is what it does. It was super convenient. Shout out to the boys, my mod boys, for putting that together. They worked very tirelessly on that. So I got to give credit where it's due. But yeah, that's when Hale came in too. So Hale, I actually know from like really early Origin phase as well. Hale was in the Discord talking with, myself, Abu, Jat, Shade, and we were really grinding Shade like all day. Shade, if you're watching this, I love you. I'm sorry for that, but every day we were like, "Hey Shade, what about this? What about that?" Or oh, maybe you could drop a little leak here. And he's like, "No, I can't drop leaks." But like every now and then, you know how it works. He'd get comfortable and something would drop, and I'd be like, "Oh, what? Okay, well, do we need to delete that?" He's like, "Okay, maybe." So anyway, that's when it kind of came to be. So it was super organic again. We didn't go out and like headhunt anybody. But I think one of the things for me specifically that I noticed, especially seeing how this has progressed, for both Jat and Hale, and even more people, is that the one thing I really like about MTTM, and this is more than me, right? Like I'm different than MTTM. I am my own person. So MTTM, I'm trying to talk about it objectively here as more than me. It almost has this like community incubation feel to it. Like we've had a lot of really important KOLs and community leaders and just professionals come in and just be part of the community. And we don't put bars on people. Like we never have. We're not like, oh, hey, if you're here and you want to interact with us, you got to like buy into us. You got to buy into the DAO. You got to like own NFTs. You got to sign contracts. There's none of that, right? It's just like, hey, you speak the same language as us. We can talk heart to heart. You're part of the family. Like it'll always be MTTM. So I like that. I think when it comes to Hale and Jat, just to put my one final little spin on this, I'm super proud of you both, especially if you're watching this. I think you have a great future ahead of you. And I'm also excited for SkyMavis being able to have people like both of you on board to help. So I'm always here to support you. Just know that.
Yeah, I think my to close out this item, the docket, right? I really like the idea of, Web3 is supposed to be about player ownership, right? And maybe it's not the most official. It's not like them buying into AXS governance, but SkyMavis obviously is is the captain of the ship of Axie right now, and to see people who basically, I guess for lack of a better analogy, literally started, got on the dang ship, started rowing the oars to help direction, helping the sails go into helping follow where the sails will go, and just like giving it's not like they gave directions, suggestions about where we should sail the ship and how we should build the ship while it's moving. And for that to be, I felt like that is acknowledgement, right? You don't often see that in, I guess, or witness it in Web 2 games where people from the community who are extremely passionate get to join the team. I think it's very rare. It's not visible. This is very visible, and I think it's a good sign. I hope more games that are building publicly or with governance more public, explore this, and I think it's something to be celebrated. So, yeah, congrats to you guys, and Godspeed. Let's do this. All right. Let's move on to something else, something a little bit meaty. So, GuildFi Global. They're one of the, I guess, early guilds that also blew up last year, 2021. They have the GF token. Disclaimer: I am not an investor. We worked with them in esports. They were a castle at LSL, and we worked with them in some other tournament operations. So they launched a updated version of their platform. So for everyone's knowledge, they've had a platform having a quest system for a while. And as some of you might follow me might know, I'm quite obsessed with questing as a concept. because I feel like it's a great way. You see it a thread we can show here. NASA editor, can you put it in? To direct a coordinated direction for a guild or a group of people and players. Something very normal in quest boards, mission boards, and game. But people are now doing this on a meta level with guilds. So they've had one for a while, but they just announced an insane upgrade that involves Steam integration. So
Hmm.
I've talked a little bit about one of their marketing people in the marketing team who worked with us, and I like something very interesting about them is that they already started doing games that I call like Web 2.5, like Nino Kuni Global. If anyone is familiar, they've had like a very traditional Web 2 launch, but they've had tokens involved. So now with this Steam integration, their platform, that's just one of the new items. You can now input, you can know your Dota 2 stats, right? And all these other CSGO related stats. And now their quest system allows integration of your achievements in those games alongside Web3 games. They have this thing called GXP as well. I believe, if I understand it right, GXP allows you to earn XP from these quests to, I believe it's exchange it for certain types of rewards or join certain raffles or exchange certain things on the platform. It might be NFTs, it might be certain slots, right? But this is the first I've seen of an actual integration with Steam. I don't think anyone's ever done it at this platform quest level. And I think it's an amazing thing to announce. Many people are doing quests, but I love to hear what you think, Rua. I think it's an amazing kind of like validation of of the in between and the merge, our new merge happening of Web 2 and Web 3, maybe, right? So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts and as a player, not someone who says guild as well in a community.
Yeah, so I think, quick disclaimer, I'm also not an investor in GuildFi. They're technically competitor to me, so you could probably anticipate that. But regardless, so I've known of GuildFi for quite a while, and I've connected with some of the people who do a lot of like the outward, like community-focused initiatives. Like I know Cloud very well. I had a chance to chat with him at one point. Really, really smart guy. But I remember it was actually your thread. So it was just today before you even brought this up. And it's funny when you put it up, I was just like, oh hey, how interesting that I dove into that right before you mentioned it. But I was really, really intrigued by it because what for me specifically, coming from like really, really old school Web 2 guilds and being a guild leader now, I've always had a different approach to Web 3 guilds. I don't think I've always said, hey, look, these huge financial entities are not a Web3 guild. They are a financial entity that has a guild within it, but that doesn't make the guild. And I think that this is a really important way to communicate that to the world. Because right now, if I was to ask you, anybody who's watching right now or listening, name me guilds. Name me Web3 guilds. You would go immediately to the big boys. You'd go YGG, right? You'd go maybe Merit. You'd go GuildFi. Like these would be the entities that you think of because these are these big financial entities. But what you might be missing is guilds like MTTM. You might be missing guilds like Chomp. You might be missing guilds like TRT. Like, guilds that aren't big financial entities, but groups of people that have come together and want to actually play games that they love with one another. And I think that that's important. So I think that the questing side of it that you're really bullish on, it comes from the gamer in you because that is what really makes the experience, right? Like you have to gamify the experience, even if it is, about ownership. And I think not losing that Web3 element of ownership is important, but it has to be gamified. So I really liked what I saw. Now I didn't dive deep enough into it to be able to understand like exactly how it is GXP, by the way, how that can be utilized to redeem rewards. But I did see that a lot of what they're doing as well is very focused on the ownership side of having the rewards, not the marketplace side. And I think that's what really stood out to me. They had a blurb in there that talked about their marketplace fees, their royalties, right? And they were saying, look, we're not releasing these NFTs with royalties attached to them. So when you trade them, we're going to be taking fees from it. And that really stood out to me. I was like, okay, like you really could, but why not? But then I think it might have been to perpetuate that essence of being a guild, of giving the ownership to the players, to the users, to the members, right? So that stood out to me. So I like it a lot, but what I am interested in is not even just the integration with Steam. Like that's a huge step forward. And I think that's really big because it gives people like, say you're, absolute top rank in Dota or like your world elite in CSGO and you integrate that and then it reads your stats and it's like, whoa, give this guy all the currency because he's like one of the best players in the world. Another thing that does is also gives you information, right? Like who's utilizing with these, who's the people that we have interest with, and at what level do they sit in the gaming board? But I'd like to see where this goes even in Web3, right? I think you get into some of these Web3 games, and it might not just be GuildFi, but I've heard from quite a few entities, tooling companies, different guilds, communities, that this whole interoperability of asset ownership, of community involvement, of like NFTs acquired or SBTs acquired from having that involvement or that experience in
Sorry,
games and communities.
1 second. Can you explain what SBTs are? Remember, some people don't know
Oh
what
yeah,
SBTs are.
will do. I guess a quick little disclaimer there. So SBT is a soulbound token. It's very similar to an NFT, but that SB is what makes it a big difference, which is it cannot be traded. So SBTs are untradable tokens, but they're identical to an NFT otherwise.
Yeah.
So an SBTs, one of the reasons, by the way, I'll just quickly put this in here, that you may choose to have an SBT over an NFT is that it incentivizes the ownership of that asset itself rather than the exchange or like the autonomy to resell it. So you would go and get an SBT to have that achievement. You wouldn't go and get an SBT to like resell it, right? So very good to clarify there. But as I was saying, I think that this is really big because I want to see how this will lead to interoperability that goes beyond just financial incentives, right? Like imagine, just as an example here, imagine you have an SBT from being an OG, an MTTM, and hanging out with us pre-Origin, talking about Origin, and we give you a special token for that. But then later on, maybe we get officially partnered with SkyMavis and we release a, let's say, Origin profile border that specifically issues to people who hold that SBT. Now, all of a sudden, yes, you didn't get that token to be able to resell it. There wasn't a financial incentive to it. But now you're seeing rewards or perks or incentives that come later on down the line that do reward you for your involvement. And this is, again, just an example. But I think what GuildFi is doing here is really setting the framework for that. Because once you have those issued, once you have people who are comfortable with the idea of accomplishment tokens, of minting their accomplishments onto their wallet, into the blockchain, you're going to have people start to view the overall ecosystem a little bit more realistically, where it's going to be, okay, I'm doing this for the ownership, not for the money, right? Because it's two things that a lot of people, I think, kind of blend together. Ownership doesn't directly mean I'm making money off this. Ownership just means you own it. You have the authority of it. You have the rights to it, and that's issued to you. So that's kind of my take on it. I'm happy to see it happening, though. And also, I like GuildFi's branding. I got to say, I know you probably could imagine that because I like blue, but I think they do a really good job making this look good. Like when I went to the marketplace, or sorry, when I went to the dashboard, I thought it looked very, very sharp, which stands out because it makes it look real, right? It's not just like a chop shop website that somebody's going to come onto and be like, oh, who are these guys? Like it looks really official, actually.
No, it doesn't look like, it's just a note in the branding as well. It doesn't look Web 2, Web 3. It looks like it's something of its own. Like they have the
100%.
whole crystal, like, they have that really the gamer feel, but it doesn't, like, if you look at it for the first time, if you don't know what the Fi usually means in, in DeFi, you won't think it's a finance, right? Or a Web3 guild, which is cool. I want to touch on some points though. Like, I think what's interesting is exactly you said, Soulbound tokens, a lot of it these days are being attributed to identity and achievements. So sorry, other way. Are being linked first to achievements. They're the way for people to not have to transfer things that people have personally achieved. So like us for LSL, when we were the first to issue like trophies that are NFTs. SBTs at the time we didn't know about, or I think didn't even I think the ERC didn't exist or something. So we couldn't actually make but our whole vision with even trophies in our tournaments, so everyone who knows esports and tournaments, our vision was actually that we wanted long term to be able to reward, and we're still working on this, to reward winners. Because that's something you can't exactly pay for, right? So if you win, you get a trophy, it stays in your wallet. Until the end of time, we know as we build brands and IPs of who have won these things, right? You don't have to know where you are, but as long as you own the wallet, you own the SBT, we know who you are. And I think achievement now becomes something related to a hot topic on Web3, which is identity. And like I said, on-chain interoperability, anybody can now go on, if they understand where the token is, with the token ID, they will know anybody who has this level of achievements. Yeah. And that can be used by any game, anyone out there. And there are a few people kind of like, I'll just be judicial about this, there are a few people also building other things related to achievement and identity. Again, I don't have everybody, but let's say I think people doing interesting things are Xborg. Xborg has a platform that has also Web 2, kind of Web 3. I think it's more manual at the moment, but you can also get achievement soulbound tokens related to your gamer profile in games even like CSGO. I think Blackhand, I don't know if you're familiar with Blackhand. So they're kind of like they call themselves D-Sports, which is decentralized esports.
I like that.
Yeah. they raised I think 100 ETH on Mirror that last year, and so they have a new project called Project Stadium, which I think is about it's an avatar identity based achievement. So I think it updates how you look depending on achievements made with partners. It's very very interesting, but I think GuildFi is the most like now tangible I've seen, and these other ones are also like on the pipeline. So exactly like you said, it's really happening. Soulbound Tokens becomes achievement, becomes identity. So it's very interesting. So we'll move on to something else. I think something also a little bit juicier, uh, less on the tech side. So PlayShrapnel, an FPS game, released a new trailer. They tout that it's on Unreal. The trailer looks amazing, my
Oh yeah.
opinion. I think that they have like the action sequences are really look more like an action movie more than a game at some points, which I loved the detail there. But I think we'll put a link in the trailer in the show notes. But it got a lot of hype and a lot of interesting things out there. I have a few, I think, of the Genesis. I have a few of their like character
The
NFTs.
operators?
The operators, yeah. I think I have a couple
Yeah.
of a few operators. Just quick disclaimer there, but I'm not outside of covering them as media. I don't think we do. I don't have any personal or company investments in them. So, I'd love to hear you think about people who mention things and just your thoughts on the game itself, the trailer.
So first off, that trailer was epic. Like that was, I remember catching it because I follow them. Weird little bit of trivia again. It's such a small world, but I was actually brought onto a Twitter space about I think 3 months ago with the PlayShrapnel team and Kieran Warwick from Illuvium. It was like it was actually a pretty goated Twitter space, not gonna lie. But we were talking about Web3 games and stuff. So I came into contact with the game at that point, and I remember talking to the team, and they had mentioned that they wanted to really model this gaming engine, like this looter shooter extraction shooter, off of Escape from Tarkov. And I don't know if you know, but I'm a huge Escape from Tarkov fan. I love it to bits. So that really resonated with me. I was like, oh, wow. And then I asked them the very important question. I said, is it going to be full loot? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, whoa, this adds a whole nother element to NFT gaming and like, Web3 gaming that I've never seen before, which is a risk factor that goes above and beyond, right? Like this is crazy. So anyway, when I saw the trailer come out, I caught it right off the bat. It was right on my timeline when I opened up Twitter, and I just got enthralled with it. And I saw, I think it's a cinematic trailer with in-game engine, because you could do that with the Unreal Engine 5. It looks so pretty now. But there was a lot of leaks in there that really paid homage to what the gameplay is going to be like, right? Like they leaked the UI, which was like the little holographic scanner that came up on the wrist. They leaked some of like the extraction gear you're gonna need, like you're gonna need the extraction beacon, etc. A few things on there. So if you know the game, there's a lot of nice leaks in there. But I do know that they're, again, very connected to this ideology that Illuvium has perpetuated for a while, which is building at a AAA level. So I know that they did a decent round. Like they have a decent amount of money. It's not quite at a level of like Axie or Illuvium, but they've actually done quite well to make sure that they're funded. They have their NFT sales. I believe they did it in 3 stages. Again, I don't want to 100% that, but I think it was 3 stages. And I do own some operators too, so quick disclaimer, good to know. But I know that they really want to build at a AAA level. So they're not promising these early access alpha games with like play and earn elements to them. They really want to build a quality game. So they're connected to obviously the ETH Lizards community that is very highly connected to Kieran and Illuvium. So that's kind of how I know them. But the game itself, very, very interesting. I think it's a game that will not appeal to everyone. Let me just be very, very clear about that. I think the risk level that they are perpetuating on this game is going to be much higher than your average player can handle. And I think that it's going to be the kind of game that could really stimulate a competitive gaming experience that goes beyond anything we've seen in Web3 so far. So obviously, being the esports guy I am, that has me very bullish. They do have a huge bar to meet. So they're promising a lot, which is important to know. Okay, that sometimes is a red flag, right? I don't want no Star Atlas syndrome here where we're holding on to our NFTs for 10 years, but I do think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put any jabs on anyone, but it is the reality of things.
It is reality,
I'm sorry.
yeah. That's how it is for Star Atlas now. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's, again, the game itself really appeals to me, and I guarantee once it goes live, you're going to see me streaming it. So at that time, Joe, if you want to do any esports on that,
That's
I'm
dope.
your man. We'll get it done.
Okay, I love you brought up Escape from Tarkov. So I guess for anybody who hasn't, is not familiar, because Escape from Tarkov actually is not known by the, I guess, the greater FPS or gaming audience, but the
No.
community is insanely strong and passionate, right? So a
Yeah.
good friend of mine and streamer, Ramen Style, shout out to Ramen, is I think an official like creator partner or streamer for them as well. Competed in some of their invitational tournaments. Well, link his stuff. He's made some very good educational videos about Tarkov, but I used to be part of an agency as a creator that I used to have, and not related to gaming, like this video directing. And so, when he got into it, he started streaming and had very good like views and videos on YouTube about it. I couldn't understand why it wasn't getting bigger because he's a smart guy. Like, but what I learned from him, I talk with him quite frequently, maybe now less, maybe twice a year, but we can't really catch up. And what I learned was how it's one of those communities where I wish Web3 existed for them,
Mhm.
because it's one of those where you don't have mass, adoption. It's insane, but the ones who were there are crazy passionate about the format, right?
Mhm.
Right. And I think that what's interesting about that for Web3, and maybe for PlayShrapnel, I'm not sure what their scale goal is, but the type of game itself, with now the NFTs loot kind of like system, is insane with player ownership and item ownership. And I can just imagine the level of commitment and commerce that will go on just with the player base with that format. So, shout out,
100%.
yeah. So, shout out to PlayShrapnel on this trailer, and kind of like, with this kind of like them just blowing the hype out of the park, right? Like, just the interest now is insane. I think it's really good for them, and I hope, I'm hoping that obviously it goes well and that they deliver on that level. Like you said, there's a lot of expectations now. They've really just
100%.
like, they made a splash. Now they gotta deliver, and I'm excited for them to hopefully do that.
I
Um,
agree. Before
uh,
you go on, because I
yeah,
know
yeah,
you're going to
go.
go on to the next one, I want to jump in because I know we are, but I really want to double down on something you mentioned and even bring this up to the people who are watching, because I'm really deep in the EFT community. Like, I know it very well. I follow their biggest creators, and I think one of the things you mentioned is really, really significant here, and that is that the lack of mainstream adoption has allowed the community that revolves around Escape from Tarkov to be a lot more open minded, to things like Web3. So, one of the things, this is a quick little bit of, I think for me it's bullish tendency. The quote unquote biggest Tarkov specific streamer, his name is Landmark. He regularly streams to like 7 to 10,000 viewers on Twitch, and he is a monster. If you've never seen him play, I swear people think he's hacking. He's so good. But anyway, he has the biggest following I know, besides like Summit, but Summit's not a dedicated Escape from Tarkov player.
Yeah.
And when they're in there, one of the things, because I watch a stream all the time, he suddenly brought up was the new Doctor Disrespect game, Dead Drop, and he specifically said, "Oh hey, I think like the new demo comes out tomorrow. I'm excited to play it." And it didn't, like, I had to double take. I actually I went to the clip recorder to rewatch it because I'm like, no, he didn't just drop Dead Drop, did he? And he did, and I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe he talks to chat. I'm gonna throw a message in there. And I was like, hey man, are you talking about the Doctor Disrespect, like the Web3 game? And he's like, yeah, man, I got a pass. And I was like, no, wait, what? And then suddenly, I would expect people to just ostracize me in the chat. I suddenly had a bunch of people in his chat actually talking in favor of it because he had streamed it or talked about it before and said it was good. And they're like, yeah, we want to get one. Oh, it looks so exciting. It was so different than what you would expect from a big Web 2 gaming streamer.
Yeah.
Everybody seemed open minded to it. So just wanted to throw that out there. That was a crazy little experience I had with the EFT community. And I think they'll probably take quite well to a Web3 game, assuming it does well and actually delivers on that front.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about it is because of the loot and shoot kind of concept. There's a lot of ownership. Like again, I think maybe it's a
True.
nice combo, right? Like an ownership combo plus the nature of the nature of the community is more tight knit. So maybe they're more open minded, right?
Hmm.
And I think that normally I was talking with a investor group the other day, and they're asking me what, before I move on to the next topic, like they're asking me, what do you think is the best type of game, for you being very embedded in this space, will do for adoption today? And I said, I think the MMOs and all that are definitely going to be bigger, but right now, I think it's still card games. It's still card games,
Mm,
and it's still and probably things related to itemized like CS:GO that have actual marketplaces that have our activity. Because for one, for card games, they're just people who play card games know the collectability of ownership immediately. Very different from other
100%.
mobile type of games. And
Yeah.
things with guns or like loot and shoot and like CS:GO related things, like exactly like you said, so I bring it up. Exactly like like a Tarkov kind of format, owning items just is a natural part of the game. Right? It's kind of like it. So once you say that, oh, that's now transferable or ownable outside of one match, it just makes sense. So I think you get an excellent point there, and to do those kind of like two really good things happening. I think that I guess it's a good tangent. So perfect. I think also lucky tangent here. So also about another card game. So last thing on the docket today. So 0xHorizon, the company behind the game Skyweaver, right? So Max and I've not talked about this before, Skyweaver in general, but so they raised a whopping 40 million US dollars, right? And that's for three products. They have two products related to gaming, but in particular, one of the main reasons for that raise was to grow Skyweaver. So Skyweaver is a card game, was very growing in popularity, had very good investors and known people backing it from gaming way back, even at the rise of like Axie and Splinterlands and all of that. But what was interesting about them was that they didn't have, for disclaimer for everyone, what's interesting about Skyweaver is that they had no NFTs as cards at the start,
Mm.
right? But you could buy the booster packs and everything using crypto. So you could use USDT and USDC to buy the game. And I think it was a very interesting, and through the bear, they never went hard in the NFT ownerships yet, but they had onboarding with crypto and building infrastructure for it. But them, so they announced a lot of this is about actually now. I think they have NFTs now with some of the rare ones. Don't quote me on that like specifically, but it's about now scaling the game, using getting Web3 and Web2 players into it. The larger Web2 games, they have onboarding infrastructure for everything. They have a content creator program, which I want to put in the link below. But I want to know where do you play Skyweaver? Are you familiar? I just know that on my end, it's been very interesting because many people have been talking about it for me for a while, specifically because they did not jump into NFT card ownership immediately, which I thought was a really tempting thing to do last year with all the money involved. And they just, nope, we're doing our thing. And a lot of good players and, Hearthstone pro players, MTG players still play it and still tout it as, at least the people I've talked to, is one of the better games out there. So, any thoughts from you, man?
Yeah, I think first off, $40 million raise in the middle of a bear market is no joke. Congrats to the team for that, holy. But I think, and I actually think they did an announcement on some of the like people who led the raise, and there's some pretty serious names in there. As far as Skyweaver goes, I've had no experience playing it. I'm not traditionally a TCG player,
Right, right.
but I've heard about it a lot. I don't think you could have been in the Web3 space over the last year and not have at least heard about it a bit, especially being an Axie person. Everybody always asks me. But I never knew that they did not actually take advantage of the NFT hype growth hack of last year. I never knew that, but I think just knowing what I know now, I actually think it might have been a really good bet on their part because it didn't end up creating this expectation from holders or start creating like this saturation of the market itself. They focused on creating the game, and I think now, especially the fact that they're being respected as a game first, and they've done this raise, I think it's going to be a lot different for them actually penetrating into a Web2 gaming market than, let's say, Axie Infinity going the opposite route and going from like hard Web3 trying to break into Web2. So I think they might actually have a leg up in that regard, and I'm excited to see it. I also think probably going to have to give it a try because I know that if they're going to be getting big in the next little bit, and MTTM's full of TCG lovers, so I'm definitely going to have to learn about it. But yeah, no, I'm very limited on it, but I really want to look into it. I know when you brought it up, I heard of the raise, but I did not realize the game had been around for so long. I actually thought it was not like it was still in development. So it was really surprising when I first looked into it and I realized, no, this game's been around for so long. It's really impressive, actually.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that, I think a lot of people might have not tried it because there is no card ownership. And the hottest thing was about owning your assets last year.
Mhm.
So this is some validation that their player base, like you said, is probably just really loyal and has nothing to do about, bags go up type of ownership. And that might be a very different kind of player base we're used to for a game that is ready for on ramping through Web3 or crypto means. I
Mhm.
know Abu and some of the MTTM guys and some of my team would be probably very interested. Maybe we can give a little commitment to that. Let's you and I try the game, try a little bit, see if we talk about it next week. Give it like a quick like, what do we think about it? Now that they've raised some good
I'm
money, we expect a little bit out there, and it's kind of like see again. I've opened the site. I think I had an early account, but I never got to play because of being so busy. So this is my commitment. I'm gonna try it, and maybe we can like do a little talk about it later.
I'm down. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. But I think that's pretty much in the docket. I did realize there's one last thing I wanted to bring up, but maybe we can put on next week. But I will share with you now. Somebody released a new type of ERC, right? And I think the term, God, I'm gonna butcher this. It's going to be how ERC 7, is it 7.721? Like one they use for NFTs now that are multiple copies of similar NFTs, right?
That's 721.
721, right? So there's a one being talked about for games specifically. I'll link the thread in the show notes, but we can talk about it next week. But about generating similar items but with randomized stats. Right. So essentially now it's the same. It's the same. Imagine 721, but each of the items have individual metadata that corresponds to stats. And the biggest touting, obviously, that they're talking about is using it for items. So imagine like right now, the way we see 721s in games are if you have this card, let's say you have this sword, everyone has the exact same sword.
Yeah.
20 pieces of the same sword. This new protocol would allow essentially games to drop 20 of that sword. There's going to be 20 of the drops only, but the stats of the sword are different. But they're categorized as the same item. Very more natural to what MMOs are like. I want to dive in next week, but any initial thoughts? I thought it was fascinating. And now as MMOs are kind of like building out to the next year for Web3, this makes sense as a way to go about items, right? Not this normal thing where everyone has the same, either one of one or an exact same of 100, right?
Yeah, I think I see exactly where you're coming from. And my thoughts on it are, I see some serious positives and also some negatives, some risk to it. So I think on the positive side, you hit the nail right on the head. And that is, it's more true to what we're used to when it comes to item generation, which is that lack of predictability, right? It's more gamified. You never know what you're going to get. Like the moment you can predict it, it loses that bit of fun. And I think that that's really big, especially for MMOs. The one risk I see, however, is going to be something we see just in blockchain in general. So as you get, I think it was Vitalik who was talking about it. He was saying blockchain, just space, the bandwidth on the blockchain becomes increasingly more valuable as you saturate it with more data. So when you get something like, I would assume this needs to be optimized, and I'm assuming it probably is, but let's hope it is. If you get something that produces in mass on a randomized API like this, I could see this being very saturated very quickly. So I'm just hoping that if it does come out, maybe it can even have this spin of almost like maybe some ZK rollup, like some zero knowledge proof tokens in here that make not everything fully minted, but make it mintable. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, you get a batch of mintable items, but they're not all of them are going to be minted to the chain. It's like if you choose, you can either quick burn it off chain, or you can take the really valuable ones that come through and then choose to mint and trade those ones. I think that'd be a really good way to do it.
Oh, super interesting. Okay, we can dive into next week. I think we're definitely a little bit over time today, but I'll bring up the item, put it in our docket thread. But I'd love to dive into it. I think it's a fascinating protocol specifically for items. But yeah, I'll let you take it away. But it was great. The topics have been excellent today. I think lots of good news. And I think people have been teasing a lot of new announcements this week. I'm kind of waiting for them, and we'll just drop them in the chat, and hopefully we'll have more juicy things to talk about next week. I'll let you take it away, Max, and do the best outro because you're the best at this.
Oh, well, thank you. Jeez, you're going to make me blush. But okay, so let's wrap this up here. First off, thank you all once again for hanging around. If you're still here at the end, Joe and I really appreciate you guys hanging out and chatting with us. It's always fun here. We're just doing this organically, getting together every week. But it seems like we just always got this brain candy to go back and forth. So I hope you've been enjoying it as much as us. If you have been, make sure not to forget, you want to be able to, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe so that you can stay up to date. Like the video. Does us a really, really big help there if you like the video. And let us know down below in the comments what you think. And on top of that, I wanted to just drop a little special thing that we're going to be doing. We're probably going to talk about it a little bit more next week and on Twitter, but we're actually going to be opening up a bit more of a community connection with all of you guys who are watching, and it's going to be done through none other than MTTM. So, of course, I know I'm a little passionate about this. I might do a little soft shilling, but I am the founder of the MTTM community. We're a very, very open and accepting community, and Joe and I are actually planning on integrating the community initiatives for the Co-op Pod into MTTM. So I'll have a bit more information on it as we go forward. I'll probably release an announcement on Twitter. If you're not following me on Twitter, what are you doing? Follow me. I'm in the show notes below. Just follow me on Twitter. You'll catch that announcement. But we want to be able to connect with you guys and get the opportunity for you guys to give us suggestions and feedback in there. So stay tuned for that. But otherwise, thank you once again. Make sure that you like and subscribe. And also, just make sure that you stay tuned for the next one. We got some crazy stuff coming up. I know Bryson hinted today that some huge news is happening tomorrow in Web3. So if you guys want to catch our opinion on it, then you're going to want to make sure that you catch next week's episode. So thank you once again, and we'll see you until next time.